Is this it for Putin? And what does Putin getting toppled mean for America and Joe Biden? This is what we know early Saturday morning about the political and military chaos in Russia. So military vehicles are patrolling the streets of Moscow right now as the Russian military accuses the leader of the Wagner Group, that's a private mercenary army, they're accusing the leader of the Wagner Group of attempting to stage a coup. This is the most serious challenge ever mounted against Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Wagner Group, is named after composer Richard Wagner, who was Hitler's favorite composer. It is reportedly filled with neo-Nazis and skinheads and ex-cons who espouse Nazi causes. They often leave Nazi-related paraphernalia behind when they leave a battle. Their Nazi sympathies, I'm talking about the Wagner Group. This is a private mercenary army that Vladimir Putin has relied on. Their Nazi sympathies, the Wagner Group, are often mentioned to counter Russian sympathizers who accuse Ukraine's army of being run by Nazis. The Ukrainian army absorbed the Azov battalion into their ranks, and the Azov battalion has been accused of having Nazi sympathies, and the Azov battalion was used as an excuse by Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine, claiming he was denazifying the region. So both sides accuse the other of having Nazi sympathies. The Wagner Group has been accused of having Nazi sympathies. The Wagner Group is the private mercenary army that, up until tonight and this morning, fought on the side of Vladimir Putin. And because Ukraine absorbed the Azov battalion into its military, Ukraine has been accused of having Nazi sympathies because the Azov battalion is supposedly comprised of Nazis. This is what's happening. There are reports that in Russia's southern town of Rostov, Wagner troops, Wagner is the private mercenary army that fights for Putin. There are now reports that in Russia's southern town of Rostov, Wagner troops and vehicles have surrounded Russian government, military, and intelligence buildings. This is really important. The Russian military is calling on members of the Wagner Group to remain loyal to Mother Russia. This is, if these reports are true, this is significant because the town of Rostov is essential in the war on Ukraine. It's on the southern border. It's a Russian town. And because of its proximity to Ukraine, Rostov serves as the military headquarters for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So if this is true, that the Wagner Group has surrounded Russian military and intelligence installations in Rostov, this is pretty serious. There are now reports that the Wagner Group has shot down a Russian military helicopter in the city of Rostov. Rostov is where the Kremlin runs its invasion of Ukraine. The leader of the Wagner Group, this is him right here, the leader of the Wagner Group has promised to topple the leadership of Russia's military. A leadership, he says, is riddled with corruption, but he insists this is not a coup. He is just trying to topple the leadership of Russia's military. The Russian government, however, this morning is accusing the leader of the Wagner Group. They're accusing him of mutiny, and they are calling for his arrest. Once again, the head of the Wagner Group is known as Putin's private army. And the head of the Wagner Group has been accused by Russian generals of attempting to mount a coup against Russian President Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, the head of the Wagner Group is accusing the Russian military of killing thousands of his Wagner Group fighters in missile attacks on Friday. The head of the Wagner Group vowed to take vengeance against the Russian military for those attacks, but once again said this is not a coup. The Wagner Group is not the Russian military. It is a private army that Putin has hired to fight in Ukraine, as well as Syria and Libya. Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, essentially has two armies, or had two armies up until this morning. The official Russian army, and then the Wagner Group, which is a private army that up until this morning answered to nobody in the Russian government other than Vladimir Putin. And as I said earlier, it is comprised of assorted soldiers of fortune, as well as gangsters and violent thugs, often fresh out of prison. The Wagner Group is run by Yevgeny Prigozhin. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was nicknamed Putin's chef. Okay, that's the leader of the Wagner Group. His name is Yevgeny Prigozhin, and they called him Putin's chef thanks to all the subcontracting jobs Vladimir Putin awarded Yevgeny Prigozhin. He's a former restaurant owner, and he was a friend up until recently of Vladimir Putin, and Putin often gave Prigozhin catering jobs inside the Kremlin. The Wagner Group, we first heard about it back in 2014 when Vladimir Putin seized Crimea from Ukraine. And that, as far as I know, was the first that anybody had ever heard of the Wagner Group. It was instrumental in seizing Crimea. There are reports that the Wagner Group also ran the Russian internet troll farms that attempted to throw the 2016 presidential election in Donald Trump's favor. The Wagner Group has been fighting in the Donbas region, that is the eastern section of Ukraine where the Russian separatists are. And Vladimir Putin has declared that that the Donbas region is now part of Russia. It's no longer part of Ukraine, according to Vladimir Putin. There are a lot of Russian-speaking people living in the Donbas region, and this is essentially what the war is about. Ukraine wants to keep the Donbas region in the east, and Vladimir Putin wants to absorb it into Mother Russia. And the Wagner Group has been instrumental in fighting alongside the Russian army, helping Putin hive off the Donbas region from Ukraine. The Pentagon recently estimated that the Wagner Group has about 50,000 soldiers fighting in Ukraine. The Pentagon says they are mostly ex-convicts. As I said, Putin has used the Wagner Group to do his dirty work, to run military operations off the books. He's used the Wagner Group in places like Libya and Syria. So he can fight wars with no accountability. Conventional wisdom is that Putin has relied on the Wagner Group to do the work he didn't want to officially be associated with, kind of the way the CIA worked with the mafia in Cuba to overthrow Castro, or more recently, America's Pentagon. If some of you might remember how our Pentagon during Iraq and Afghanistan hired Erik Prince's private mercenaries from Blackwater. When you think of the Wagner Group, try to remember Erik Prince, who is no longer an American citizen, Betsy DeVos's brother. She was Trump's education secretary. Erik Prince is no longer an American citizen. I believe he lives in the UAE. He runs a private army of mercenaries. And at one point, he came to Donald Trump and asked him to privatize the war in Afghanistan. So the Wagner Group is really important to follow because they are mercenaries, they are soldiers of fortune, they are guns for hire. And because we don't have a draft, America is relying on subcontractors. We don't even know to the extent that we're relying on Erik Prince and military subcontractors who get six figures. Our soldiers don't get anywhere near what the mercenaries from Blackwater, which changed its name, get. We're moving in America to a similar situation if we don't put an end to this, where Blackwater or something similar to the Wagner Group will be used to fight our wars, so there's no skin in the game, so Americans don't complain. It's easier to have mercenaries fight your wars, so pay attention to the Wagner Group. It's a cautionary tale. And who do you root for, Putin or Wagner? I have no idea. As of this morning, there now appears to be a split between Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner Group. This is a picture of them during happier times. Russian generals are now demanding that Wagner Group soldiers grab their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin. That's Yevgeny Prigozhin on the left, and that's Putin on the right. The Russian military is demanding that members of the Wagner Group seize Yevgeny Prigozhin, their leader, and turn him over to Russian authorities. There are reports of armed vehicles now patrolling Moscow to restore order, but it's reportedly calm. There's no need to restore order, but there is a military presence now on the streets of Moscow. And once again, there are reports that Wagner Group soldiers have surrounded key military installations in Russia's southern border town of Rostov. And this is really important because Rostov, because of its proximity to Ukraine, it serves as the headquarters for Russia's war efforts. Now, I don't know if these reports are true, but if the Wagner Group, if soldiers are surrounding Russian military installations in Rostov, this is serious. The Wagner Group has been accused by Russia's top military officials of attempting to stage a coup against Vladimir Putin. And we are getting reports that the leader of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has taken to social media and accused the Russian military of corruption. This is really interesting, okay? The leader of Vladimir Putin's private army has made the case that Biden is making. The Yevgeny Prigozhin is slandering the Russian army and Vladimir Putin and reiterating basically the case that President Biden and NATO have all made for arming Zelensky. The head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, this is really important. He has taken to social media and accused the Russian military of corruption. He has accused the Russian military. He's never mentioning Putin by name. He insists this is not a coup. He's threading the needle here, but he is accusing the Russian military of misleading the Russian people. And he says the Russian military is waging war in Ukraine not to return the Ukrainian people to Russia's bosom, but instead to run a racket of corruption. That's what he said, a racket of corruption that benefits Russian oligarchs who have deep ties to Russia's top generals. When Vladimir Putin attacked Ukraine, when he invaded Ukraine, he said he was reabsorbing Ukraine. He says that Ukraine was always a part of Russia. The head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says this is not true. It's just a corruption racket. The latest reporting is that the Wagner Group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has not named Vladimir Putin as the guilty party in this war, which he now calls unnecessary. The head of the Wagner Group is now calling the war in Ukraine unnecessary and unprovoked. This is significant. This is significant for the head of the Wagner Group to say that Zelensky, the Ukrainians, did not provoke Vladimir Putin into invading Ukraine. The latest reporting is that the head of the Wagner Group is portraying Putin as the victim of poor intelligence and bad advice from his Russian generals. Russian generals are accusing the Wagner Group of staging a coup against Putin. The Wagner Group says this is not a coup, and they have no quarrel with Putin. Russian military are calling on members of the Wagner Group to detain their leader and turn him over to Russian authorities. On Friday, the head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, accused the Russian military of launching missile attacks against Wagner Group soldiers stationed in Ukraine. He says that they killed thousands of his soldiers. He then promised to seek revenge for those attacks. Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, denies again that he is leading a coup, but said he has 25,000 private soldiers at his disposal who are not afraid to take on the Russian military. There are reports that Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, think Blackwater, think Erik Prince, he recorded a 30-minute video late Friday from an undisclosed location. He accused the Russian military of firing missiles at Wagner Group soldiers who are on the front lines fighting in Ukraine. He claims that these missiles have killed thousands of his soldiers. He also accuses Russian generals of not providing enough weapons to the Wagner Group. And he accused Russian generals of having a cavalier disregard for the lives of Russian soldiers. He said that these generals are acting in their own financial self-interest, making decisions that benefit them and not Russia. Once again, the head of the Wagner Group said the invasion of Ukraine was unnecessary. He said the purpose of the invasion was not, as Vladimir Putin maintains, an attempt to denazify Ukraine. He said, the head of the Wagner Group said, Putin misled the Russian people and the Ukrainians when he justified the invasion of Ukraine by saying he is going in there to denazify Ukraine. The head of the Wagner Group said Putin was not justified in launching the invasion. We've had these conversations on the show. He says Ukraine, this is really important, the head of the Wagner Group says Ukraine was not on the verge of launching an invasion of Ukraine's Donbas region to take on the Russian separatists. We've talked about this on the show. Right before Putin launched the invasion, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was reportedly firing missiles into the Donbas region. And people who support Putin's invasion say that Zelensky necessitated the invasion by firing missiles into the Donbas region. The Donbas region is part of Ukraine. It's on the east. It has a lot of Russian-speaking citizens, and it has been used as the justification by Putin to invade, to liberate the Russian citizens there. And he has declared that the Donbas region is now part of Russia, and that's what the fighting is about. The head of the Wagner Group says that Zelensky, Ukraine, was not provoking Putin into invading, that Zelensky was not attacking the Donbas separatists in a way that necessitated a full-scale military invasion by Russia. In his 30-minute video, he said, Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, said the purpose of the invasion was, quote, he said the war was needed so that a bunch of animals could simply exult in glory. It is against the law for Russians to criticize the invasion of Ukraine, with several thousand Russian citizens right now doing time for criticizing Putin's war. Prigozhin also accused the Russian military of downplaying the number of casualties suffered by Russian soldiers. And he said Ukraine's recently launched counteroffensive is turning into a military disaster for Russia. He accused the Russian military of hiding the bodies of at least 2,000 Russian soldiers in order to downplay the severity of their losses. So is this it for Putin? What do I know? And but what does it mean if Putin is toppled? What does that mean for NATO, America, and Joe Biden? Well, the Wagner Group is probably worse than Putin. The Wagner Group, do you want Eric Prince from Blackwater toppling our military? Do you want to turn the Pentagon over to private mercenaries? Do you want to turn our military over to ex-cons and neo-Nazis? So that's the Wagner Group. And I don't, in war, there are no good guys. What does it mean, however, politically, if the Wagner Group succeeds in toppling Putin? At first, it will make NATO and Biden look good because they've demonized Vladimir Putin. The same way when Bush and Cheney toppled Saddam Hussein, it looked great at first because they had compared Saddam Hussein to Hitler. And our media has done a pretty good job of comparing Vladimir Putin to Hitler. What's the alternative? The alternative, from what little I know, is Prigozhin, the mercenary, the head of a private army of neo-Nazis named after Hitler's favorite composer, Wagner. Everybody thought it was a great idea that we had toppled Saddam Hussein. As bad as Putin is, tell me what the alternative is. So it's probably going to look good for Biden for a couple of weeks. A lot of the Republicans side with Putin. They won't admit it. They side with Putin. They're rooting against Ukraine. They see Putin as a white Christian nationalist, a Caucasian, and they think he was provoked by Zelensky. I don't know. I don't know what the alternative is. All right. I hope I explained a little of this. To mark the one-year anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, former Vice President and current candidate Mike Pence spoke before the Faith and Freedom Coalition's annual conference in Washington, D.C. on Friday and called on all Republican candidates to support an abortion ban after 15 weeks. The BBC reports this morning that a new poll indicates that only 44% of Americans support a 15-week abortion ban, while 52% oppose it. Democrats going into the 2024 presidential election are hoping, like in the midterms that we just had, that abortion will be on the ballot. A 15-week abortion ban is not popular, but Mike Pence has to win Iowa, and Rick Santorum, who dedicated his entire political career to outlawing abortion, won Iowa. He won the Iowa caucus in 2012. So there are evangelicals, there are anti-abortion Republicans who will come out and support Pence, even though he's polling really bad in Iowa. So Mike Pence, don't discount Mike Pence. He's more dangerous. DeSantis is unlikable. Just because he's in second place, it doesn't mean anything. I keep using the term threading the needle. Mike Pence is very dangerous. He has the machine behind him because he's a former vice president. He's kept his mouth shut. He plays it close to the vest. He's a despicable, horrible human being, which is why he could end up being the Republican frontrunner. He has the gravitas. He's been indemnified because of his behavior on January 6th. He was loyal to Trump, but he moved away from him at the right time. If you're a Republican, he's the guy. If you're an establishment Republican, he's the guy. Chris Christie is the one to watch during the debates because he's fun, but he's never going to get the nomination. It is conceivable DeSantis is imploding. He's not going to, I know he's in second place. He's not going to do well. If Trump's legal problems create an impossible situation, Mike Pence may come out of Iowa and go into New Hampshire stronger and more dangerous than you can imagine. Detestable, horrible human being. I had more stuff on him, but than this thing in Russia. Well, I'll talk more about Mike Pence. Very dangerous, more dangerous than Trump, perhaps. Trump is just a fascist. Mike Pence is a theocratic fascist, and he means what he says. Trump is just running a con. Mike Pence is running a con, but he believes some of what he says, and so do his supporters. I don't have time to get into it right now. 7 million people around the world have died from COVID. America's top intelligence agency is the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It was set up by the Bush administration after 9/11 because the CIA and the NSA, they weren't connecting the dots, so they created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I think about 18 intelligence agencies fall under the umbrella of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Back in March, Congress, controlled by the Republicans, demanded that that office declassify everything all our intelligence agencies know about the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China, in Wuhan, and the role it played in the spread of COVID. The order gave the intelligence office 90 days to issue a report, and on Friday it did. And according to a new report from America's top intelligence office. They look at all the classified material of our 18 intelligence agencies that we know of, and they declassified all their studies on the origins of COVID. And they have concluded that there is no direct evidence COVID came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They concluded there is no direct evidence. They haven't ruled it out, but they said there is no evidence that COVID came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The report says most of America's intelligence agencies agree that the COVID virus is not the result of genetic manipulation. 4 intelligence agencies, we have a lot of intelligence agencies. 4 intelligence agencies believe the origin of COVID was a zoonotic leap from animal to man, most likely at the wet market in Wuhan. Two intelligence agencies, however, the FBI and the Department of Energy, believe the COVID virus originated from a lab, not necessarily the Wuhan lab, but they believe, the FBI and the Department of Energy believe the COVID virus originated from a lab, but was not genetically engineered. All U.S. intelligence agencies agree that COVID is not the result of the Chinese government attempting to create a biological weapon. The World Health Organization 2 years ago ruled that the lab leak theory was unlikely, but some of the intelligence agencies suggest it might have come out of a lab, but not because anybody was creating a biological weapon. Now, Republicans prefer blaming China. They want everybody to believe that COVID was leaked on purpose by China because that's good for Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump shit the bed on COVID, so Republicans carry Trump's water by pushing the narrative that COVID was engineered in Wuhan by China as part of a biological war program. The Republicans would rather blame China, they call it the Chinese virus, than Donald Trump, who ignored all the warnings and completely shit the bed. Writing in the Daily Mail, former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the 5 passengers who died inside that submersible on a voyage to look at wreckage of the Titanic died for a cause. He said they filled him with a sense of pride because they were pushing out the frontiers of human knowledge. Yes, that's, whenever there's a car accident on the side of the road and I slow down and create a little traffic and I look at the wreckage, I am pushing out the frontiers of human knowledge. And whenever we rubberneck and look at a car wreck, we should be proud. That's what makes humans great. This is what he wrote. I'm going to be disrespectful. I don't want to get into this, but this is what Boris Johnson, the disgraced COVID-parting former prime minister of Great Britain, wrote for the Daily Mail. He gave us Brexit. He gave us Brexit because he didn't think the British would be stupid enough to vote in favor of it. It's identical to Trump. Trump ran for president because he didn't think the American people would be stupid enough to vote for him. And Boris Johnson pushed Brexit because he didn't think the British people are stupid enough to vote for Brexit. America and Great Britain, we have a very special relationship. We share a common language and a common stupidity. This is what Boris Johnson wrote. By the way, he's not a bad writer. He's a great writer. Too bad he didn't stick with the writing. This is what he wrote. I know there will be, this is what he's writing about the tragedy, the second Titanic tragedy of this week. He went on to write, I know there will be many who will say that Harding and his fellow adventurers were foolish and that we need regulation against such experimental technology. Even before the news of the implosion, the lefty Twittersphere was awash with criticism that these people had more money than sense and that we should not be wasting huge quantities of taxpayer cash trying to rescue them. This is what Boris Johnson wrote, and I didn't say any of this. I might have thought it, but I didn't tweet this. I didn't say any of this. Boris Johnson goes on to write, we were told by the lefty Twittersphere we should not be expending such emotional energy on a few members of the plutocratic elite when so many more have just lost their lives in the Mediterranean where a boat full of migrants capsized. That's Boris Johnson. I never said anything like that. I wish I had the courage to have said that, but I'm too chicken shit to say any of what the lefty Twittersphere had said. So good on you, lefty Twittersphere. I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go to the bottom of the sea to look at wreckage of the Titanic, and I wouldn't go there to criticize wealthy plutocrats who spent $250,000 each to basically rubberneck. $250,000 is a lot of money. You can do a lot with $250,000. It's sinful to waste it on desecrating a burial site. Basically, this is where the people who died on the Titanic are laid to rest, and just to go, they're like grave robbers, basically. And spending $250,000 to gape at human tragedy is sinful, especially when that $250,000 could feed, I don't know, 50,000 homeless people. But I'm not going to criticize those plutocrats. That would be wrong. And okay. I am, hang on for 1 second. It's the end of the week. Do I have any of the veal? This is the highlight. This is my lab grown. I'm going to end the end of the week. I look back. What did I accomplish this week? And it was this. Hang on. This is what am I doing? I want to show you something that I'm really proud of. Okay. It was veal in my laundry room that I showed you on Wednesday. This is, there's a laundry room in my apartment that I share, and I set up a centrifuge, and I've been growing my own veal, cruelty-free veal. This is using stem cells, and nobody is hurt. It's guilt-free veal. How great is this? You know, when you eat regular veal, you're pulling a baby from its mother and then slaughtering it. How do you live with yourself? But it's so delicious. What if you could do what I did, which is take some stem cells and run them through a centrifuge, get some seawater, and let it percolate for a couple of weeks? How can you not want to eat this? This is my lab-grown veal. I have never been, this is the highlight of the week. If I did a best of David Feldman, this is what I would run. My lab-grown veal. How could you not want something this succulent and delicious? Please write to the Food and Drug Administration, because I can't get an authorization to start marketing my lab-grown veal. I think it's big ag trying to shut up the little guy. They don't want me to become a billionaire. But Who wouldn't want to eat this? Please write to the Department of Agriculture, the USDA, and say, authorize David Feldman's lab-grown veal, cruelty-free. Cruelty-free veal. Nobody is hurt by this. It's been an interesting week. Thank you all for staying with me. Office Hours returns next week. I've had some family stuff that I had to attend to, so we haven't been doing Office Hours. Please sign up for my newsletter. Please share this episode. I should probably take that down, right? If you want to help me, and the only people who help me are Sam Cedar and Robert Smigel, and then the people who listen to this podcast. The people who help me the most are the people who listen to this podcast. So if you want to help me, all you have to do is share this. Please copy and paste the link to this episode and email it to friends. Share it on social media. That's the best way to help me, because nobody else is going to do it. Nobody wants me to succeed. So please, and if you could like this, that helps. What else? Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my newsletter. Is that it? Yeah. And thank you to the moderators in the chat room. They do a great job keeping the garbage out. We don't allow garbage comments and garbage people in the chat room. So thank you to the moderators. Have a great weekend. Be good to people. If you're depressed and sad, take care of one person and you'll feel better. Find somebody who needs a phone call, probably a member of the LGBTQ community. This is a very rough time to be a member of the LGBTQ community. Show them some love and tenderness. Pick up the phone, call them. We need to take care of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. It's very important. They are the canaries in the coal mine. They really are. The way you judge a culture, a society, is how the government treats the LGBTQ community. They are among the most vulnerable. They're like children. I'm not trying to infantilize them, but they are vulnerable. And how we take care of our most vulnerable tells us who we are as a people. So pick up a phone, go visit a member of the LGBTQ community, and show them support. It is Pride Month. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak.